it was our job to make sure that we kind of knew how everybody else was feeling and we all didn't have a bad day at the same time. And so if things went bad, you could call like a knock it off, which is I think something cool that works great in life. Like you're doing something really intense and like things are not going right and someone might get hurt here. So it's like, hey, let's just knock it off. We'll go home. We'll talk about it and we'll come back tomorrow
I
and
think that goes in any
do
branch
it
of
again.
service. Knock it off, just for flying.
Yeah.
If it's bad, if it's going downhill.
Yeah.
Even when I pre-flight, 3-strike rule.
Yeah.
Like if there's things going wrong, like, oh, this is leaking. It's 1.
Yeah.
We can fix it, and then something else happens. It's 2. And heaven forbid a black crow just flies by. I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, it's over.
Yeah.
And then we can fly now. All fire, no smoke is our candid conversation as 2 military aviators sharing the unique experiences we've had in combat, reconnaissance, and demonstration flying.
Through personal stories, technical details, and laughter, we explore the challenges of balancing leadership, motherhood, professional life, all while offering inspiring insights for those who are trying to strike that work-life balance.
I'm Meryl Tangestal, retired Air Force Colonel. You guys might know me as the Dragon Lady. I flew the SH-60 helicopter in the Navy before switching over to the Air Force and becoming the first and only black woman to fly the U-2 spy plane. My last job was at the Pentagon, where I was the Director of Inspection for the Inspector General.
I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Caroline Jensen. I go by the call sign Blaze. I flew the F-16 Fighting Falcon, better known as the Viper, in the Air Force during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and was later selected as the first female reserve officer to fly with the prestigious United States Air Force Air Demonstration Squadron, known as the Thunderbirds. My son also happened to be the first kid to ever get to watch his mom fly with an advanced jet demo team. We are looking forward to episode number 3, my favorite number. This episode is all about applying lessons from the cockpit to our everyday lives.
Like staying hydrated, eating right, and how the pilot and the ground crew have to work together as a team.
It's not just the pilot in the sky. We're going to talk about things like being honest with yourself, taking feedback, and putting the mission and your team first. And we get into some great, unique flying stories.
Like flying over the tree lines on a medevac mission in the jungles of South America. Or takeoff procedures and vertical formations in the F-16 with the Thunderbirds. Just to show how important integrity, honesty, and teamwork are, whether you're in the military or just living your regular life.
Yeah, so there you were. I want to know, like, you've heard things about preparing for a U-2 mission and that there's a lot of oxygen and you're like suited up and people are like walking you through the squadron. You have to sit around. Like, what is the prior or the pre-planning for a U-2 mission like?
Oh. So a lot of people talk about U-2 missions, like I've heard crazy things like, oh, you get catheterized, or hey, you can do whatever in the suit, and hey, you can walk around because it's like a mini mansion. There's some truths and there's some lies.
A mini mansion?
Yeah, like in a house, like you can get up and walk around and do stuff. And let's see. So I'll take you from the beginning of a mission that I was going to do, say in Korea or the Middle East. Little variations, but it always started about 24 hours prior to showing up for the brief, right? So what you put in your body is very important. You don't want to have foods that the next day are going to trigger. So it's not advisable to have Taco Tuesday if you have a Wednesday flight. You want none of that, right? I know people who did it, and I'm still upset with you. Anyway, so so you try to have, for me, this is my personal experience, I really didn't eat much the day prior. I drank water, I worked out, but I ate very little. To the point that when I probably showed up for a brief, I was kind of lethargic, like sugar low, but I liked it that way. So so about 2.5 hours prior, we'd go to the squadron and everyone came to us. So the first thing we did is we would typically go to physiological support, the guys who dressed us up for our suit, and we'd take blood pressure check, and they'd find out what we ate the night before, how we felt, were we sick. So if your blood pressure's out, if it's in the hypertensive stage, you can't fly that day.
Wow.
So they didn't mess around. They also take temperature.
Hmm.
Then they want to know, they get your food prep, what you want. So typically, if I'm doing, for every hour I'm doing a mission, I typically would get a bottle. So if I'm doing a 9+ hour mission, I had 9 bottles of water, or we could do
Wow.
Gatorade, or we could do a cut of Gatorade. I don't like Gatorade, no offense, sorry. But I just drink water. And then the type of food, we had tube foods, insert pictures of tube foods. They have tube foods, different variety of stuff. My favorite was caramel pudding, vegetarian pasta. They were good.
It does not sound good.
It sounds, I'm gonna get you some tube food next time.
It's all right. I'll take your word for it.
I'm gonna get you some mac and cheese. I will get you some pizza. I will get you some hash browns and bacon.
No thanks.
Yeah. We're gonna try it next time.
Blended through a tube.
Well, yes. I mean, it's pureed food, but it's made by Natick Labs. So
Okay.
they're the same people who do astronaut food. So we get that, then we go back in, and then we have our intel brief. And the intel officer will come in and tell us what we're doing for the day. They give us the why we're doing the mission. Probably similar to what you do. Then we have maintenance come in and tell us the status of the sensors, how the aircraft is. I always tell, like, the U-2 pilots look really cool, but it takes like a team of people, like a lot of people to get our single body up there. After that, we go back to, we look at the forms, or we talk to maintenance, then we go back to PSD and we start integration. We need to be on oxygen an hour prior, 100% oxygen an hour prior to taking off. We can't go high. It's done to help off gas. So imagine, I always say off gas like a piece of furniture that you get new. It takes a while to off gas. We have a lot of nitrogen in our body.
Okay.
Nitrogen causes decompression sickness. 100% oxygen replaces the nitrogen in your tissues. Your body likes 100% oxygen much more than nitrogen. So that reduces the susceptibility to decompression sickness.
Okay.
With me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So about an hour and 15, we get dressed up in our underwear, maybe insert video of that. We get in, PSD integrates us in the suit, and they start testing the suit to make sure it's the integrity of the suit is fine. So we have 2 ways to pressurize the suit. There's a knob that you could press that will inflate the suit, and actually a dial button that we can do. I don't want to say the numbers because I don't want someone on YouTube or say, you're wrong. I think it's like 3.5 PSI. Please don't quote me on that. I don't remember. So they test the suit out, and once they do, they put our boots on. They do everything for us. I love the squadron because, the average age is about 20-something years old, and they're basically dressing us like we're toddlers. And they deal with everything. If, someone has a blowout or someone, urination in the suit, I mean, they're strictly professional. We come out in our underwear. We're not in our best light, and they just do what they need to do. They make us as comfortable as possible until they escort us to a bread truck. Once we're integrated, they put us on a container, a LOX tank. They put us in a truck, like a bread truck, and then we go out to the aircraft. In the meantime, as part of the brief, which I didn't say, myself and the mobile, which is another pilot of that day, that mobile is basically the wingman. He's the one or she is the one that pre-flights my aircraft, checks the forms, signs the forms, will be with me from aircraft startup to aircraft shutdown. When I'm doing the mission, they monitor the mission. They will help me out if I need any help. If I have an emergency, they're the ones who break out the checklist. We brief prior as well about what to do in case of emergency, on the ground, takeoff, coming back, all those things, similar to, I'm assuming, the F-16.
So is that like, because I know you have chase cars and the takeoff and landing is special. Is that mobile person? Are they the one that assists?
The mobile is the person that's driving the chase car.
Okay.
So typically the mobile car or the mobile vehicle, but the person inside who's another pilot, another rated pilot, qualified and current, is the mobile.
How fast does that mobile car go when you
Depends on
do a landing?
Depends on who's driving it.
Yeah.
When I drove it, well, it's not like I'm gonna get in trouble. excess of 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Before I crossed
Nice.
the whole short.
How many times a month did you guys fly?
If we're home, typically it was, I think, the minimum.
Mhm.
I think 2 high flights a month, and then 4 low flights, or maybe it was 3. Depended on if you were mission ready, like BMR and CMR status,
Okay.
combat mission ready, or I think it was basic
Basic.
mission. Yeah,
Mhm.
mission ready. So it just depends.
Okay.
The higher up I went in rank, the more jobs you have, the less you're
Yeah.
flying. You're on the flight schedule. When you're deployed, we fly once. We're eligible to fly once every 3 days.
Okay.
So after we land from the first flight, if you're over 2.5 hours, so if you had to come back early, next days you had to have off. And then the following day, ground duty only, and then you were eligible to fly.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess the most interesting ground ops would have been on the Thunderbirds because we didn't look at the forms. We didn't even set up the switches in the cockpit. Our crew chiefs did all the forms. They set the switches like they were supposed to be set for us, and there's a number of what they call maintenance. My crew chief, dedicated crew chief, would be the one that would set that, and that's a lot of trust because you could have like a fuel cutoff switch on or the hook switch down, and when you put power on the airplane, like a lot of bad things could happen if it's not set up properly. So we trusted them to do that and to look at the forms, make sure that the jet was ready to go. Life support would come out, and the helmet would be sitting right there on the canopy rail for us, and our harness is already in the seat, and so you'd hop in, and it was like this very regimented. Like we'd all get in at the same time and sit down and strap in together, and the crew chief would save your life sometimes, be like, "Hey, do you want to?" Get your G suit hose, or like they would actually connect it for you. But anytime things got a little bit out of order, it was tricky. And then we would start the airplane like looking straight forward, and you would be feeling, because there's like a crowd of, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people sitting in front of you. So you're doing all of this trying to start it. And
No pressure.
yeah, really, you got used to it, and you're trying to like look with your eyeballs. But one really interesting thing that I didn't know till I flew the Thunderbirds is that the panels in the airplane aren't exactly the same in all of them, even though they're all the same block of F-16. And so you'd go to like move something, and it used to be here in this cockpit, and it's over here and in a different cockpit. So it's really interesting how they are like kind of uniquely different. So
I don't know. Quick shout out to the maintenance guys and the physiological support detachment that make us look good. So
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you always need a group of people around you to like just lift you up and have your back. So I mean, we put a lot of trust in, at least for me, physiological support and maintenance, crew chiefs, physiological support. Their mottos: we toe the line between life and death. Like those are the guys who are dumping the urine out of the aircraft at or is it maintenance? No, I think maintenance dumps the urine, but they're the ones taking care of the suit if it's flooded or whatever.
Yeah, we'd be getting out of the plane, and you hand a piddle pack over the side to your crew chief, and they kept us alive, and it was really interesting, and a really close relationship, and especially with the Thunderbirds, I think there's this kind of misconception out there that the Thunderbirds is 6 pilots flying 6 airplanes in an air show, and the truth of it is that there's about 130 different airmen and over 30 different jobs in the Air Force that make it so about 65 people can go on the road every week from March until November. So it was important, and everybody's job is really difficult. I like to say, like, what the linchpin of the whole operation I thought was really the finance guy who had to do all of our all of our travel vouchers. He had to file like 60 travel vouchers, make sure they're process all of them. We had to file them on our own, and then make sure that we got our credit cards like reimbursed, so nobody's getting like late fees on their cards, and then processing orders to go again like every single Thursday. We would go and come back on Mondays. So
I found that was interesting when I went into the Air Force, when I switched over. The Navy aviation and maintenance, incredibly tight. tight to the point, at least when I flew helicopters, you had your detachment maintenance officer, your detachment ops officer, but the detachment maintenance officer would work with the detachment chief. And if the maintenance guys were there on the weekend trying to get your aircraft ready or your helicopter ready, I would call in my pilots and like, you're going to be there with them.
Yeah.
And you're going to, Navy, it's for real. Like we bust rust like no one's business. Like going to a maintenance course and learning that there's like at least 14 different types of rust and how it looks and all that. That's a real thing. Water is a big menace to, steel and aircraft. So, but I would turn wrenches with them if they let me turn wrenches. I love to learn everything I could possibly do with a helicopter on the Navy side. But the Air Force, like they don't want you in the shop. They're like, get out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm here. I got my torque wrench. And they're like, no, ma'am, go fly that aircraft. We got this.
Yeah.
But there was times I would help take off rotor blades, or I learned about over torquing the first time. But like the maintenance crew for the Navy, they loved if we were involved. I never had done so much painting in my life.
Yeah. We got really close with our maintenance, obviously on the Thunderbirds, but also when I deployed to Iraq.
Mhm.
And the schedule over there was like one day I'd sit, they call it top 3, and you're the overlord basically of everything that your squadron's doing that day, like which pilots are going on which missions and what aircraft they're flying. And so you'd interact with maintenance to make sure that those aircraft are ready, and then make sure that the pilots are ready to go. Then the next day you'd fly a mission, and those missions were usually 4 hours long. And then the third day you'd sit alert, and it'd be like 3 8-hour alert sections, and there's like a little bit of time to overlap to trade them out. But you'd go out and get the jet set up so that if the bat phone rang, you could pick it up and run, and you were airborne within 10 minutes. Like that. So the jet would be ready to go. They'd have to like pull the pins. There's a pull a couple pins from the airplane, you'd like start it, and you would already have like the navigation like halfway ready to go, and you're just like rolling. So we'd get to sit with those crew chiefs, and we'd be watching like pirated movies, like Transformers, I think was like big back then. We're watching it like all the time, like too much, but you talk and you get to know and really appreciate these guys. But
yes,
I'm from Wisconsin, and there was another crew chief who was from Minnesota, and we'd sit alert a lot together. And there was another pilot there, but one of my main crew chiefs was this young airman from Denton, Texas. And by the end of our tour, he had lost his Texas accent and had picked up the Wisconsin, Minnesota accent, and people were asking him where he was from. So it's like, that's togetherness and teamwork,
yes.
Just totally interacting and getting to know those guys was pretty funny. Yes. That he was really offended that people asked him if he was from like Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Well,
yeah.
No, I love maintenance crews. Had good times in the boat. Yes, sir.
So then can you ask her like, hey, walk me through the air show?
Oh yeah.
There's so much.
Okay, so give me the down and dirty. Okay, we know that we can go into extreme details about like our mission. So give me the down and dirty, especially in the air shows at Thunderbird. I know everything had to be locked and loaded.
Yeah.
And did you feel, last question, did you feel you were better than the Blue Angels?
Oh. Obviously, the answer to that question.
I do.
But the Thunderbirds was really intense, and there were a couple pilots on the team who'd gone through weapons school, which in the Air Force is Air Force version Top Gun, like very, very, very intense training. It's just you eat, breathe, sleep, flying, and that's the way the Thunderbirds were. And you would come home during training season at the end of the day so tired, like you could barely just like unzip the top of your flight suit, tie it around your waist, you'd sleep on the couch sometimes, and it was mentally exhausting, physically exhausting. And we flew Monday through Friday at least 2 times a day, almost every single day. And the Thunderbirds have actually changed their training now, so they go and do deployments and they travel to train, and so they're gone a lot more. But we were flying twice a day, every single day. And you start out with 2 airplanes, and you start out with the easy maneuver. None of them are easy, but just doing like a loop and a roll, learning how to do that with 2 aircraft, and then adding a third aircraft and a fourth, and starting out with a 5,000 foot floor and working down to like 3,000, 2,000, like eventually down to like 500 feet or whatever the show called for at the time. And so it was very calculated. It's people think it's like, oh, flying by the seat of your pants. I'm like, no, I hate roller coasters. And yeah, I just think they're not very safe. And we were very safe in a Thunderbird with the way the crew chiefs took care of it and the way we did building block approach to how we trained. So we, you really got to know how like people were doing and how if they had a good day or were having a bad day. It was our job to make sure that we kind of knew how everybody else was feeling and we all didn't have a bad day at the same time. And so if things went bad, you could call like a knock it off. Which is, I think, something cool that works great in life. Like you're doing something really intense and like things are not going right and someone might get hurt here. So it's like, hey, let's just knock it off. We'll go home. We'll talk about it and we'll come back tomorrow. And
I think that goes in any branch of
again.
service. Knock it off, just for flying.
Yeah.
If it's bad, if it's going downhill.
Yeah.
Even when I pre-flight, 3-strike rule.
Yeah.
Like if there's things going wrong, like, oh, this is leaking. It's 1.
Yeah.
We can fix it. And then something else happens. It's 2. And heaven forbid a black crow just flies by. I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, it's over.
Yeah.
And then we can fly another day.
No. Well, so we'd learn how to fly everything at the Nellis Range, which is a really hard show site because of the terrain there. And then you'd go out on the road and sometimes you'd be over land or like one of the most challenging shows or the most challenging would be like high density altitude, high pressure altitude. Yes. One of my buddies said the least fun he'd ever had in an F-16 was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And he was a slot pilot and got like behind. And so he lit the burner and we didn't want to light the afterburner while we were flying because the smoke would burn so hot, it would just dissipate. There would be no smoke if you lit the burner coming out of it. But he lit the burner to catch up, was being really aggressive. And he ended up like overshooting, like he went out in front and underneath of the boss. And yeah, so
That's not good.
You have to be really careful. We had one day in Colorado where the boss like pulled a lot of G and it was like 90 degrees in Colorado at the Air Force Academy. And he pulled, and it was the big bomb burst maneuver where we all cross and then we all are like within 2-3 miles, which is pretty amazing. And we affect this rejoin. But when you go up, everyone's like on the wrong, like left and right, we're on the wrong side. And the boss pulled, and the amount of G he put on with the way the environmentals work, he basically stopped. And so all the wingmen ended out in front of boss. And like we're all supposed to be rejoining off of him. And we're, it was kind of mayhem.
Helmet fire.
Yeah. And there's certain things that you plan for that, hey, this is the out from this maneuver. And there's certain things you're just like, all right. So as 3, it was a lot of times it was my job to pick up and be like, all right, let's all just continue straight ahead, maintain our altitudes. And then, and then the boss, once he got turned around the right way, we would come back together. So there was a lot of learning. Sometimes you go to an overwater show, they're like birds, heinous, like birds are not good when you're only, you're flying like a couple feet or less from each other. And then overwater shows too, they would put boats out there. And sometimes it's Fisherman Bob with the GPS who's just, enjoying tanning and the boat's really like drifting, which is really dangerous when you've got, especially the solos are doing these high speed passes. And then other shows, they would have like this Coast Guard platform that would be like spewing water and just like locked in on those coordinates. So you could really see where they were at. But yeah, it was a lot of work and you learned everything you needed to know to do the job safely during training season. And again, that was like flying 10 times a week. But then once you went out onto the circuit, then you learned about over mountains, over water, birds, high temperatures, even going on the tanker and like flying through like really, really thick cumulonimbus clouds and like working your way around different things. And I was a first assignment instructor pilot, went cross country all the time. But some of these other guys, like they're fighter pilots, they don't fly in the national airspace. They go and fly in a MOA or restricted area. Yeah. So it was a big learning curve for a lot of people.
Did you were number 3?
Yep. Number 3, the right wing.
Right wing. Did you ever practice for any other position, or number 3 was your position, period?
Yeah, I was number 3 and there was no understudy. So if I didn't make it for whatever reason, if my jet broke or say I had a sinus infection or something, then I wouldn't fly. But The Blue Angels have changed. I think they've changed the way the Thunderbirds do it. So the slot pilot, and that's the person who flies behind the boss, can move to either wing. So I'm not sure. They may have made something to make it look a little bit more uniform. Yeah.
So how long did you fly with them?
It was a 2-year tour, but I was on the team during 2013, and the government or the DoD went into sequestration, and so we lost any like reliable and long-term funding, and so we ended up getting grounded in 2013. So then they kept us over in 2014.
Okay.
And that was a real roller coaster of emotions and everything, because they were like, well, we're all checked out and we're going to just hire new officers. Like, well, that's great. And these guys are checked out, but they've literally only ever flown on like the Nellis range, and they haven't seen all of those things. And honestly, my first season, and I joked with the solo that came out at the same time, I was like, how long did it take for you to see other planes? Like, I was so dialed in on the boss and what I was doing that like halfway through the season, I was like, oh, there went a solo, or, oh, like I had awareness because of the radios, but just like visually picking up and like figuring out where everybody was like real time. It took a long time. So you go and you learn how to be safe, but you really learn how to be a good Thunderbird kind of as the season goes, and you're always progressing and you're making the formations look better and closer. And everything we do is recorded in high def, and they go through and hit pause. So there's no mistakes.
I will tell you something that is more painful to me is debriefing a formation flight in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Like we would do it in the Navy but the Air Force.
Yeah.
You guys take it to a level that I'm used to it after, but in T-38s, actually, I got to see it when I was a T-6 instructor, and then I flew with the IFF guys, T-38s. Yeah. And I would, the first time I was like, oh, that was great formation. Let me sit through the debrief. 2 hours later, I was like, yo.
Yeah.
It's so,
so
painful.
I did support for a Strike Eagle Weapons School upgrade ride. And I feel like we took off around like 2 or 3 o'clock. And so I didn't have to be in everything. And then it was like maybe an hour and a half flight. So we debriefed it. I think I went home at like 7 o'clock at night. It was a little bit later, but it was still like, I say the taxpayers it costs a lot to operate these airplanes, and the taxpayers get a lot for their money because these debriefs can go on and on and on. But we came in the next day and they were still debriefing the flight in the next morning.
Was it not a good flight?
No, I mean, I think even good flights at weapons school, they do that. But
but if it's a bad flight, it's going to be a long, long time. Yeah,
but like red flags, the big wars, and you'll brief as, like I flew Red Air, the aggressors for the end. So the aggressors we'd brief, and then we'd go into the big briefing with all of the assets, and then we would get cleared off, and then they would do their briefs, and then we'd brief separate, and then you'd brief down to like your 4-ship, and then even sometimes down to your element.
If they wanted the U2, we would just fly in.
Yeah, lucky. Just phone in your debrief. But the debrief,
you guys still debrief.
Yeah, it would take like 7 hours, and they even have a system that can record where all the jets are, and they play it back, and everybody's got their own different color and their call signs on there. So that made it just it's an hour and a half flight. There's a lot that goes into it, but honestly, on the Thunderbirds, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, the briefs and the debriefs, you'd think it was boring. It got to be really fun, and you could just say a lot. Like you'd look across the table at somebody, and you'd know like somebody messed something up, or I don't know. There was like a lot of really funny like little inside jokes and relationships, and sometimes it'd be tough because you had to debrief yourself, because we're all like really intensely flying what we're flying, and occasionally you had something for other people. But you really wanted that person to go like, I maybe rolled too fast and got ahead of this, or I, wasn't quite in there, and you'd want people to debrief themselves. But it was enjoyable, and it was very efficient too.
But what I love about that, and what I love about pilots in the military, at least in the Navy Air Force, is that you take those skills on the outside, and whatever you do, you critique yourself. You're like, you're pretty honest with yourself about, hey, this is really good. This was bad. You're very introspective in terms of what you've done. So I like that about us.
Yeah.
and about most military people, because I think if you look at pilots or softs,
Yeah.
they, we're just very honest, but it's very hard with dealing with civilians because civilians don't want to do that. They don't want to look truly in the mirror. They want to they like this nice facade. Oh, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's like, nah, it's lipstick, man, on the.
I worked for a Fortune 50 defense contractor, and I remember my first annual report, and my boss was like, "Yeah, great job, great job." And I was like, I need feedback. Like, I want to know what I did wrong and what I need to do better. And I think that was really ingrained. And oddly enough, the person that was my boss was a retired general. So I'm just like, I know I didn't do everything right. No, he didn't. It was really interesting. It was kind of that culture and being around civilians, like constructive criticism doesn't always come off as constructive in the civilian world.
Oh yeah.
People have a hard time with that. But
Yes.
yeah.
I would give constructive criticism.
Yeah.
I've had a few civilians cry. And I'm like, seriously, we could go grab a beer after.
Yeah.
But
yeah. You get in the debrief, you take the rank off.
Yeah,
we have an
like,
honest
hey.
conversation. It's not personal.
No, but
Yeah.
they want to make it more than it is and be like, you don't like me. It's like, not. It doesn't matter if I do like you, but I'm starting not to now.
Yeah.
So just seriously, it's
Yeah.
okay. We all make mistakes and we do stuff. Like my kids are used to it because I'll look at them
Yeah.
and I go, and they get scared and they go, you think you think I'm mad? My daughter should be like, yes. And I go, no.
Mhm.
I said, you just need to do better, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now.
Yeah. So when I tell my son something, he puts his head down. It's like, pick your head up, look me in the eye, and tell me it's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
We're good. That's just try to make the next time better than the time before. But I wanted to ask you also, do you have a top most memorable or a couple most memorable flights or events or things that just really stand out to you that in an aircraft?
In an aircraft, man. So I could start with helicopters. The 60 Bravo, we talked about anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, search and rescue. Man, I think one of my most memorable is we were on the boat. I was on a frigate at the time. I was the detachment maintenance officer. And there was a guy on the ship's company that worked in the galley. And he stuck his head in the dumbwaiter. He was talking to someone. And the dumbwaiter was malfunctioning in some way. But he stuck his head through. He was talking to someone down. The dumbwaiter was above. Whatever safety mechanism failed. And it fell and hit him, struck him. Almost decapitated him. But it jacked him up. And they needed to medevac him. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to figure out how to medevac him because we were off the shores of Cartagena at the time. So we were in Colombia. And we found that there was, my jet operations guy found that there was an admiral somewhere in Colombia who was stopping to get refueled going back to the States. And so we decided, hey, we can transport him to it. So we did a medevac off the boat, short notice, got the diplomatic clearances, dip clearance, and we were going. But it was I felt bad for the guy in the back, but the line was amazing. Mm-hmm. It was like something out of the freaking A-Team. We were over the jungles, it was dense jungle, and we were, we had our maps out because we didn't, really not a lot of GPS back in the day. In the late 90s, it was just coming online. And, we're popping up to see if we can find it and then going back down because Colombia doesn't like SH-60s. I mean, we do a lot of counter drug ops out there. So, to take one of us down or to take an aircraft would be a good thing for them. So, we were doing all that and we found this area, but it was flying over the tree lines like that. I'm smiling right now because I'm like, hell yeah, that is, that's that helicopter flying that you do. And we're doing 150 knots, not fast, but over tree lines. Yes. Yeah. And there were a couple of power lines through and you could see river areas and boats going through. And I'm like, I really want to stop and see what they're doing, but we got to keep going. So that was exciting for me. Yeah. What about you?
There's some really good combat ones, but one that really stands out was actually, I guess the first time I lit the afterburner in the T-38, and it's like pushing you back in the seat. And the afterburner in the T-38 is like nothing compared to the F-16.
I bet.
But you would take off, and I think you go a couple miles off the departure and then turn. And by the time you made it 180, you were like looking down 10,000 feet over the airfield. So that was really cool. And again, the T-38 is like, you know, as far as jets go in the Air Force, it's like at the bottom of the totem pole. So it's pretty old, but
F-16.
yeah.
U-2, single engine.
Yeah.
Right? How much thrust?
The
Approximately.
Pratt & Whitney 229 engine was 30,000 pounds of thrust, and that's what I flew with on the Thunderbirds. So you could, you know, we'd take off, put the gear up, and go straight over the top. And once we were pointed straight up, we'd be about 220-ish, I think. So we'd take off, turn off the nose gear. 4 was on my right side, so I could not deviate because his wing was like basically hanging over the side of the runway. Take off, and then he'd move into the slot position.
Okay.
And then pointed straight up, he'd say, "Burners out, ready now." And you know, you want to make sure you do that because nobody's overshooting. We're all doing everything at the same time. And then you're just kind of pretty slow the gear up, and you go over the top. Sometimes the gear warning horn would like beep because you're slow airspeed, below 10,000 feet without your gear down. So just like all this kind of crazy stuff going on. And
so explain like slot positions, like closed positions. So one right under the other.
Yeah. So the Ford Diamond aircraft is like leads up front, left wing on the left side, right wing on the right side, and then the slot pilot would be right behind the boss. But for takeoff, because of the, you know, the engines, and you don't want a jet engine behind another jet engine is really bad for the airflow into that engine. So he would have to take off on the right of the right wing and then move over once he got clear and could clear everything. But one of my most memorable things, so I went to the Air Force Academy. I worked really hard to get into the Air Force Academy. My first semester, I had a 2.2 grade point average, like barely made it through. And it was the end of the year. We had just finished all of our finals. We call them graded reviews. And it's like cramming for 10 hours for like one review, staying up late, you know, barely passing that. And you had like, I don't even know, like 5-6 classes you had to do that for. And I got my 2.2 grade point average, and I had to move. And I was just feeling so sorry for myself because I gave this experience 110%. I gave it everything I could to get in there. And I was like moping across the trots of the campus.
I'm sorry, I could just see the.
Yeah, it's like Charlie Brown, just like, you know, sad, like walking. And I was startled by this rush of an aircraft going by. And I looked up, and it was a Thunderbird racing between the chapel at the Air Force Academy and the Front Range. And I was like, holy crap. And I was like, yep. I'm like, I'm not going to quit. They're going to have to kick me out, you know, and I'm here, and I'm going to go through all of this just for the chance to fly a fighter. I didn't necessarily want to be a Thunderbird pilot until I applied for it later on in life. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do, you know.
Do you know, I mean, how many people just like want to be in that moment?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. And so that pilot inspired the heck out of me, and it was just his practice day, right? Like he wasn't even doing his job. He's just flying. And then, you know, fast forward to 2012, when I was on the Thunderbirds and we came to the academy to fly graduation. And when you get there, we'd like hold high, and then a couple of the other jets do their things. And then when it's my turn to drop down and run my low bomb burst lines, guess who was flying between the chapel and the Front Range? It was me. And like, it was just awesome, you know, to think like, man, I was down there, little ant walking across the campus, like thinking I wasn't going to make it through. And, you know, and here I am doing this. And hopefully that if there's someone down there too, who's really having a hard time wondering why the hell they put themselves through all of this, that hopefully I lifted their spirits and inspired them to keep going.
I didn't even know what the announcer would have said on there, but you inspired thousands of people that day. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like there was no announcer. It was like practice day. So it's just a bunch of cadets like walking between classes and, you know, going about their daily business.
That's
like
cool.
Little ants walking across the campus is called the Terrazzo, like the main area.
Did you go a little lower just for them?
No, we're not allowed to do that.
But did
a little
you?
Faster, a little lower. Yeah, but that was like really memorable just to be like, man, like I just, you know, full circle. Like I remember having such a hard time. And it's not even a show day. Like, you're not even doing all the fancy stuff. All you're doing is like
Just making it look
going
easy.
to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just playing around.
Playing
So,
around.
yeah,
Going.
it was really neat.
So with all the things that you did, I mean, we didn't get into the nuances, like all the aviation geeks right now go, oh, we want more. You'll get more later. But what were the skill sets that you walked away with that helped you in your civilian life, from the debriefs and the briefing and the planning and the meticulous nature that in the military? What was like the one skill set that's like, just comes to the front of your mind about how it improved you as a civilian?
I go back almost to the core values of the Air Force, right? Integrity first. Like, you have to be honest all the time. If you screwed something up, did something wrong, not only is it, I mean, it's mostly taped, so you're never going to ever get away with anything. But you owe that integrity to everyone with you. We mentioned this on an earlier episode. Like, the job is literally, it's pretty simple because it's life or death, right?
Right.
And so your ability to pilot the plane and the ability to get better really depends on your integrity and, your preparation for it. And, speaking up about when you don't know something, and, and also having the integrity to call out maybe a superior pilot, someone who ranks higher than you. So not taking those things personally when you're that upper, maybe you screwed something up as the flight lead and you can talk to your wingman about those things, but also just having a thick skin.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's a thick skin so much as like just not taking things personally, because we're all a part of a team. And again, it's a life or death mission. If it's us running aircraft together in a formation, like, there's certain standards and procedures that keeps us safe. But also, like, when it comes down to wartime, there's warfighters on the ground and they depend on us to do our job to make sure that they are safe. And so it just, I don't know, nothing was make believe. Like, there's so much training that you weren't really in that position, but everything had a purpose, and it was to keep us safe and, our other DoD partners and allies on the ground safe.
I would agree with you. I don't know if it's because I'm older or because I left the military. If you don't have integrity, you're dead to me. Like, I can't.
Absolutely.
I can't with you. It's one of those things that it's a non-starter. It's, if you're a person that can't get past your own ego, we're going to have a difficult time, because, and I try to instill that in my kids. My son, like, kids go through this phase where they do something wrong. They go, I didn't do that. Or, oh, well, I meant to do this. And I go, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
Like, you call them on the BS quick. And I said, look, no one's going to hang out with you if you keep trying to gloss that over.
Yeah.
You own it. Say, hey, I messed up. I'm sorry. Hey, can we go this way? You were right. Those are the words you should be saying. And my kids are getting that. But I said, but if you try to, like, if we're in front of people and you try to do that, I'm gonna embarrass you. Your mom's gonna embarrass you. Because to me, it's very important that you have that integrity, you have that core value. Like, that's a non-starter for me. My daughter, when she came to us 3.5 years ago, I told her there's a lot of things you can do, but lying to me or doing something like that, it's a non-starter. And she tries it all the time. But I'm like, no. If you're gonna be a Tengistal, this is how you're gonna operate.
Yeah.
And so, you're a Tengistal? She goes, yes, I am. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, integrity is huge.
Yeah.
I wish more people would lean into that.
Yeah. That's the cornerstone of everything. Like, in your home with your kids, or on a team at work, whether you're in the military or at a, defense contracting company. Like, everyone has their job and has to do it to the best of their ability. And always doing what's right when no one's looking is the only way to really move forward efficiently and to trust one another. And it builds amazing morale at the same time.
If you have no trust, you can't build anything. You just, man, you just can't. And I don't know, it feels like in the civilian world, a lot of people lose sight of that. A lot of people do things that they think no one's looking. But you can understand, if you're an adult doing that, some child probably sees it, is probably going to emulate that, or going to say something to that effect. And it's really, I think it's incumbent upon us. And I mean, that's why we're doing some of the things we're doing today, and
Yeah.
why we talk to people, and why we like to talk to young kids, to be that example.
Absolutely.
Yes.